just going to jump into it. And I'm going to have you guys introduce yourselves. So if you could, your name, what you do, your role, where you work, so forth. We'll go down this way. You can start, Eric.
Cool. I'm Eric Boyer. I work at Sprout Social. I'm a product designer and developer.
I'm Ashley Phillips. I work at Modest and I'm head of product there.
I'm Marina Goldstein. I am a product designer at Braintree, and I'm also a product designer at Emerly.
I'm Anticio Duke. I go by Duke. I am a UX UI designer at CraftJack and a few other startups.
I'm Koo Hubbard, and I'm a product designer at Matchup.
Sweet. Cool. Well, our topic tonight is exactly how did you get into product design? And we might as well just take that question head on to get started. And I think I have a few questions written down. If anyone has questions, please interrupt, ask them, right? Ask them why they're relevant. And we'll save some time for the end for questions as well. Cool? So yeah, how did you guys get into product design? Did you strategically move into it? Did it just sort of happen by happenstance? How did you guys get into this? Duke, we'll start with you. Yep.
All right, so my background is in mechanical engineering. I have dealt with product design, tangible product design, slot machines, aircraft engines with GE for 8 to maybe 10 years. And I saw that there was a difference, a segue between the digital landscape and the physical landscape. And so I designed a quick, dirty UI for a slot machine at one point, and I'm like, yes, this is the space to be in. And so, yeah, right. So once I did that, I basically scoured the internet to find different tools and resources to learn digital product design. And then I made the transition, and it's been glorious since then.
Awesome. Good. Yourself?
I guess I come from a print background and a more traditional graphic design background. I graduated in 2013, and I was really into getting to Chicago. I'm from Michigan, and so I just started applying to all the jobs, and finally one stuck. Someone hired me. So I worked at a small digital agency, and then kind of realized I didn't really know if that was right. I knew that digital was right. So once I wasn't too into that position, I started looking into more digital agencies, but was a little bit more strategic and started looking at digital agencies that had a product. And so I landed the next position, and there I kind of snuck into the mobile app world at Vidori and started working on that mobile app. And once I realized that this product was going to launch and I would be off the product, I kind of pursued Matchup, or Matchup pursued me, but that's kind of how I got into it.
Cool.
Sweet.
Marina, yourself?
So I saw that so many people were product designers, and I was like, what is that? I was like, oh, okay, I kind of like doing this. This seems way cooler than working at an advertising agency. And I've been working at, my background is in advertising, and I kind of wanted to just be more challenged. So I took the plunge and I quit my job, and I decided to go and take a web development class. And from there, I was like, man, I really like building products and thinking more about the user and their experience and kind of making things that made an impact, not really, made a long-term impact, not just a banner ad that sold something to you. That's just my own opinion. But so that's kind of how I got into product design. It just kind of fell into my lap, and I started to really love it. And now working at Braintree, I'm learning so many new things, and I'm starting to just love it even more.
Cool. Eric?
Yeah, so I've spent most of my career as a front-end developer, so everything I've ever done is really technical. When I started out, I really wanted to have the skill set to be able to do everything, but I never wanted the job where I actually did everything. So right now, my day-to-day tasks still include a lot of front-end development stuff. but I would kind of like to drive my bus more to the design side of things than the back end side of things.
How much time do you spend in like product design versus front-end development right now?
It's probably 30% product design, like 70% front end.
Cool.
Yeah, I'm really into like the interactive side of things and kind of like working with like a team of really awesome visual designers, but then kind of like complementing them with like the interaction side. So it's been good to be in a collaborative environment with the people that are very skilled in other areas.
Yep. So actually, you're like, are you the only one who's not a designer on the panel?
Yes.
Right? So give us your, like, what's your story then? How did you get into product as a whole?
My story is probably I would say very atypical for someone in product. I used to be a reporter and producer. I worked in news in New York, and I was writing about as a tech reporter. So I was writing about a lot of tech stuff. I covered. I started doing it like right around the time when Twitter was starting to get, it wasn't even popular, but when Twitter sort of like started, when the first iPhone came out, like right around that time, and I was just interviewing all these people and talking to them about all these cool things that they were making, and it made me want to do it as well. Made me want to be able to make something rather than just writing about all the other things that other people were doing.
Yeah.
So an opportunity at Nickelodeon sort of fell into my lap. I totally should not have been hired. But
Is that like a dream job?
it
Do
was,
you get to slime anyone?
but anyway, I got the job, and I loved everyone there, and I just was like, I'll try this out and see how I like it, and I loved it. And I just had a really great team of designers, amazing designers there, and engineers who just were very generous with their knowledge. So that's how I ended up in product.
Crazy.
Yeah.
So you came from like the copywriting journalism side.
Yeah.
So what did you learn from that actually like applies to the product end today? What could you like, glean off of it? What makes you better today because of that experience?
Not being afraid to ask questions.
Okay.
You know, I mean, like just being able to like ask questions about the technology, ask questions of, you know, who your potential users are. I think having that experience and just being like you have a curiosity innately, but like having that just sort of bring it out in you, and just like having that skill of like always like hammering and trying to get deeper and trying to find out more.
Yeah.
I think that really helps me within product.
Nice.
Yeah.
Do you have like an engineering background a little bit, right?
Yeah.
What about you? What do you take from like the engineering side into product design, you think?
Well, the way I see it is the experience for the user should be seamless, in a sense that we all carry our phones, right? But in order for that phone to not be a doorstop or a paperweight, it's the software. So as long as those two are in line, that's what matters. So taking the understanding of how products are designed and developed from a tangible perspective, and then how we design the experience from a digital perspective, that marriage should be seamless. And so I take those sort of principles and those ideologies from the physical and try to translate those holistically.
Nice. All right, Marina, advertising. What do you bring into product design from advertising?
I think what I learned in advertising was, like, I was just working as a digital designer, and then I would pass along my, Photoshop file to a developer and just cross my fingers and hope, that's what it ended up looking like. But
Give it to Eric.
yeah.
Don't fuck this up.
Pretty much.
But what I took from that was I didn't really, I wanted to be part of that process. I wanted me and the developer to sit together and start it together. Maybe I would even be the developer too, or maybe the developer would have, a sense of design. So I think what I got out of advertising was seeing the way something is working and how I would prefer it to work. So I feel like I got a lot out of that. Also, just now that I work at a place where I'm the client, I kind of sympathize, or I'm sorry, with the people who I work with as well. So I feel like I'm on the other side of the people.
Eric, what's your side to that story then? 'Cause it sounds like you're more on the front end side, but gradually move over to like product design side.
Yeah.
So
I think I've been extremely fortunate to work with really awesome designers over the years. So I feel like I bring that, just like being exposed to their work and working on it for so many years, kind of, that's all in my toolbox now. But I think the point in my career that I learned the most was when I was full-time freelance for a year, and that was really awful, but really good at the same time. Just because I was terrible at saying yes to everything, and I realized that
you would say that?
I would,
Yeah.
and I did. So I learned a lot about like estimating work and what's realistic, like what I'm capable of doing, and that is very helpful in like setting expectations with people on product.
How often do you pair with designers, like Marina's talking about, like sitting down and working together on stuff?
Right now at Sprout, I'd say, I mean, they're generally pretty far ahead of like where the engineering team is at, but they're very present in sprints as well. So I'd say like maybe 20% of the week we are actually working together and solving stuff.
Okay. Cool. Yourself? You're new in product design.
Yeah.
Right? You graduated in 2013, right?
Mm-hmm.
What did you pull into this from your previous experiences?
My learning and
Like
education.
you learned to stay up all night and study.
Yeah.
Stay up all night and design.
I mean, obviously, like, the basics came from school, like hierarchy, typography, color, whatever. But I think, kind of similar to Marina, like, just once it was, like, passing off designs, it was kind of like, well, yeah, good luck. This is cool. I'll be over here working the next thing. But then there came a point where with consulting and doing digital consulting, there was a lot of that situation where it was like just passing off designs and then moving on to the next thing, and there wasn't a very good sense of empowerment. So it was kind of like, how can I get to the point where I'm kind of more involved with the user and understanding their needs more, rather than someone kind of like trickling down and like having this like telephone conversation of this is what they need but not really kind of thing. So it was kind of like, how can we reconnect with the user a little bit more?
Yeah. Let's I want to dig into this a little bit, like the entire the pairing idea. Do you guys do it at Modest?
We do.
Designers and engineers get together?
They do.
Yeah. How well does that go?
When it happens on a regular basis, the product is so much better for it. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Sometimes design is working a little bit ahead of engineering, and it just never goes as well because things can get reprioritized and things move around. So you might have someone, like Victoria Canal might have worked on something, and then it doesn't get worked on until a month later. And a month later, we're moving really fast. The needs may have changed, like the problem may have changed a little bit, or we know more about the problem, and so the solution needs to be tweaked. So in my mind, it's always better, and it ends up so great. And every time we're like, oh, this went so well, and it went so well because engineering and design were working in lockstep.
Yeah. Marina, what's it like at Braintree?
Pairing is ingrained in Braintree. It's like the founding layout of Braintree, I feel and just iterating on projects. And that's what's so great about having so many developers and front-end developers around you, because you can just have somebody help you and sit with you and figure it out. Even though, at the end of the day, I am, designing first, but when I know I'm going to pair with someone, that it's seamless. It's it just comes out so much nicer, and you're not spending your time designing worrying if it's pixel perfect. You're worrying that if it's perfect for the user, which is something that I've learned so much just pairing.
Awesome. Dude, Crap Jack, do you guys pair?
Yes.
What's that relationship like?
To piggyback on what they just mentioned, to develop a product that's seamless, it works when that communication and that collaboration is in tandem. We do it for a lot of reasons. One, to make the product better, but also to communicate what our expectations could be. So for example, let's say I'm designing an experience for a certain way or a certain approach for a user, then they can let me know what capabilities are out there, what kind of functions that we can work with, and maybe sometimes that's utilizing existing code to make that experience seamless across the entire product or whatnot. But that, I think, is imperative. Product design and development is imperative to be in tandem.
So we all, like, sounds like everyone works in like a pretty tech-heavy culture, right? Like all pretty tech-centric and driven. How's that like differ from, be it consultancies or ad agencies, and like what's the actual design process look like as a product, as opposed to an e-commerce website or like a brochure or something like that? I mean, you come from the advertising side. How is your design process different today as product than it was then?
It's like taking a jet, like at Braintree, it's like taking a jet ski to like the website island. And you just like get there so fast. That's like how I always picture it. And like in advertising, it's like you have to talk to all these people and jump through all these hoops, and it's like by the time your design is done and you're waiting for it to get developed, then the client wants to change it or there's copy changes, and it's kind of like having this like tech-heavy culture makes it okay to just, so what if it goes live and something needs to change? We can change it in a day and it'll be fixed. And there aren't too many cooks in the kitchen making a decision, like making every decision. I feel like at a certain point when you're talking to people and everyone's important, then you're like, who's the most important person? Who's like the last person who has the say in what's right and what's wrong? And I think that's what's so great about, the person who says what's right and what's wrong or what's working or doesn't is the person using your product, not, someone in an advertising agency.
Someone not on website island.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Do yourself. What's your design process like on the product end?
Yeah, I think it kind of depends on which piece of the product we're working on, but there's a lot of communication. There's a lot of times where we do pair and it goes really well. It saves a lot of time, honestly. But sometimes there's situations where I'll jump into a SAS file and edit and hope that it's looking okay. For the most part, it's been going well, but it just depends on which piece. But I'd say I prefer to pair just because it is faster for a developer to take what I'm doing and make it happen rather than me kind of like, I think this is the right whatever command or whatever it is that I'm changing in a SAS file. So there's a lot of iteration there. It just takes me a long time to get through it. So pairing is definitely ideal.
Cool. Dude, what's your design process?
Basically similar. It's iterative. It's definitely pairing, and it goes that's all we all can chime in on. It goes so much better when you pair. Like it's literally like a marriage, and when you're both joined together, it works. It works so much better. Yeah, right. We're gonna honeymoon website island. That works.
Oh man. Actually, you mentioned like the difficulty of staying ahead of engineering, but also like not being so far ahead that the priorities change. And like you just end up throwing away a bunch of work, or by the time engineering gets to it, that you're so far gone in like the context of the next problem that it's not like it's hard to be relevant anymore. Like how do you balance that? How do you? It's not an answer. I'm just like it's a struggle.
Yeah, it's a struggle. It's a struggle, and I think I think we're getting better, but you know, like you have to, you know, I'm thinking about like, you know, not just what we're doing right now, but what we want to do, you know, next week and a month from now, and sort of like what the whole universe, or you know, what the whole universe could look like, and sort of, you know, all the problems that we have that we're trying to solve, and you want to solve them like right now. So yeah, I mean, it's really hard, but I think like I think, you know, one thing that you said beyond Website Island that resonated was this idea that like even if it's not perfect, this idea that you can just keep, because like you have great engineers that you're working with so closely, that it doesn't need to be perfect, and that you can just keep iterating, and you can do it super quickly, and then go from there. And then maybe the problems that you thought were super important aren't really that big of a deal.
Yeah.
It just kind of changes, but it is hard, and I don't think there is a good answer, and I don't know if anyone has figured out the perfect answer for that.
Eric, what's your take on the opposite side of that table a little bit, coming from like somewhat of the engineering side?
Yeah, for sure. So I spent a fair amount of time in the agency world as well. I think the biggest difference between that and working on products is on the product side, everyone kind of has an understanding of nothing is ever final. I think that's what you guys are really hinting at, like iterating over stuff. But not even just like from the engineering side where like we can do it fast and we can just change it in code, but like even the design, like even the Illustrator file, that's not final either. Like you can always change things. So just staying super light, like having an awesome product manager is a game changer. Like somebody that can really break that
Someone like
down.
Ashley.
Yeah, for sure. Somebody that can see like 5 years into the future, but can like break down right now and make that manageable for people to do it.
Marina, how do you know when to stop iterating? Like when are you like, this is good enough, next problem?
Oh man, I don't know. I don't think I've hit that wall. Well, I don't have any creative directors anymore, so there isn't that. I'm kind of my own. I'm responsible for my own decisions and my own like stopping point. One of my coworkers told me one time, he's like, nothing is sacred. Just like keep going. Like just, you know, I know you probably worked on this for like a week, but it doesn't matter because it's going to change anyway. And I was like, you know, that's actually a really optimistic way to look at things, because yeah, maybe I worked on this for a week and I struggled a lot with it, but at the end of the day, I learned something from it. And, you know, maybe if this took me a week this time, then it'll take me 2 days next time. So that's kind of what I get out of just constantly changing things. And user testing is like a blessing. You know, just getting feedback from people and not taking it offensively, because at the end of the day, you're not designing for your friends. You're designing for the people who are using your products. And I think that's the opinion that matters the most.
Yeah. Is there a trigger when you're iterating that you're like, yep, this is good, like time to move on, next step?
I think at the moment, that's something I struggle with, is iterating. You know, I think as designers, we kind of have this sense of perfectionism that we strive for. And I mean, I just, you know, sometimes it just depends, you know, how much, is this the only thing I'm working on today? I'll keep going, I'll go all day. But, you know, if it's, you know, if there's like I mean, there's always a lot of things going on, granted, but, you know, it's definitely a struggle knowing when to stop iterating. And I mean, luckily we can change things quickly, but at the same time, it's like, this will be okay, but, you know, like, you know, when you implement that, can we look at that again, or let me just think about that as you work on it, you know, kind of thing. So still definitely a little bit of a struggle.
I feel like the opposite is also true, right? Like we can iterate on something all day, every day, but a lot of times we're like, okay, good, like moving on to the next project, or like, you know, we're not going to do the next iteration, we're going to come back to this, right? But do we actually ever like go back to it, right? Do we ever like actually put it in the wild, and, like let it marinate, and then come back to it after we tackle like a separate, completely opposite big problem? Dude, what do you do?
Slightly, yes. And I say this.
How do you convince people to go back to that if it's actually like working? You just don't think about it.
That's an interesting question.
That's not perfect. I want to make it perfect.
So the rule of thumb that I usually give myself is like the feedback on results. So a lot of times I'll design something within the product that needs to be split tested because I'll design different revisions. I don't know, perfectionists like that. But we'll split test it. And depending on the results I get from one version versus the other, tells me, oh, okay, you're onto something here. Let's fine tune that there. So I think it's more, for me, it's more the results of the design after it's out in the wild and you get that feedback. Then it's like, okay, maybe I don't need to touch it anymore. Or, you know, there's a drop off on conversion or something like that. Then it's, oh, okay, then let's rethink this area. So I think those are maybe, for me at least, those are the key points in which I would choose to touch it again because there's always something else new coming. You know, there's always something else you need to be designing for or a system. So,
Good deal. Product's big though, right? Like we all have to wear multiple hats, right? It's not like, I don't know, I think I'm speaking fairly vaguely here, but like, it's not like as a designer or product person, you're like, I do like visual design. Like chances are you do, but you also do research and content strategy and like the whole mix. Like, what's something like you're responsible for today that you're like, what? Like, how did this, like, why is this on my lap, right? Like, what's something you're doing and you're like, I never imagined I would ever have to do this, like, as part of my responsibilities. Eric, you go first.
I don't know, man. Drinking a while LaCroix?
Yeah. Hydration is key.
I really don't think I've ever felt negatively.
But I don't think it's negative either, right? I think like sometimes it's like it's almost exciting at times. You're like, wow, I get to do that. That's awesome.
Yeah,
But you're like, that's also crazy that I'm gonna do that.
for sure. I honestly don't have an example of anything specific, but
Yeah.
just the fact that the impact of what we're doing, like the end goal and how someone perceives that later is huge.
Yeah.
I just don't think that maybe initially you understand like what it is. I know it's cheesy and kind of like a Silicon Valley joke, but like changing lives.
So we're pretty small, so I do a lot of stuff. I don't think there's anything that I do that I'm like amazed that I'm doing it. There's stuff that I'm doing that I'm like, oh, I wish someone else could do this because they would be so much better at it than I am.
What's that then?
It's writing copy for like, ironically, it is writing copy for like sometimes I'll end up touching up like marketing copy, like that's on our website, or like internal tools for retailers. That doing that stuff after you've not, then that's not your area of expertise is really hard. And I think it really makes you, and even though I used to be a writer, it really makes you appreciate like how it makes you appreciate like all these other things that are, make up the whole, and like how hard that is to do, and how kind of amazing that is, that you can bring all these people together and make this thing. But yeah, I really wish that we could hire someone to do that.
Yeah. Ready yourself?
100% copywriting. Like,
Is anyone here a copywriter?
yes.
We have some openings.
We need you.
I mean, like, the typical advertising agency model is like you design your page and you put in a bunch of lorem ipsum, and then you hope you have an awesome copywriter. I've worked with such great copywriters that I've trusted I don't even read what they send me because I'm like, yeah, you're smart, I know.
That's risky. You definitely want that job.
But now I'm like,
She
what?
sends lorem
I
ipsum
have
back.
No, that would be like the non-ideal situation for me. Like, while you guys talk about pairing, like we make the best stuff when like front-end designer and copywriter start together. So yeah, like lorem ipsum gross. We're not
not allowed to do that anymore. No more lorem ipsum is allowed. So you have to like actually take a stab, especially with a product, because it's like you built it, you've designed it, you know it the best. And that's another way, like you wear a bunch of hats because you like research, you do like user experience, wireframes, like, you know, everything is so siloed sometimes at advertising agencies that you're like, oh, that's not my job. But at product, like doing product, everything is your job. And almost, but also I can't believe like that I'm actually coding, which is crazy to me because last year I was convinced I would never even be able to understand like CSS or anything like that. And the fact that I'm like committing to GitHub and like things are actually on a website or on the product that I built is really just crazy to me. So hope that's inspiring.
Did you seek that out? Like you said a year ago, you never imagined you'd be doing it. Like was it a year ago where you're like, that's just insane? But like, did you actively like fight to learn that, or like how did you go about actually picking that up?
Yeah, that was kind of what was so hard. I constantly would take classes or do things online, but the balance of learning and working was really hard, and paying attention and not actually having like a project that I could dedicate my education to. And so I just was like, well, I guess I'm just not that type of person who will learn to code. But then I'd get so frustrated because I was like, I want to make my designs real. I don't want to wait for someone to make them real for me. So that's why I was like, okay, sorry job. I'm going to go learn stuff. I'm going to go learn to code and just learn, even though that was probably the hardest thing I've ever done, just like web development, front end, back end. Like I took a starter lead class over last summer, and it was the hardest 3 months, but it was the best because it made me feel like I could do anything, and it kind of reassured me that if you just take the time and you focus on something, you can learn whatever you want.
Is that a requirement for your job to know how to code today?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Yes.
For yourself, what's one thing you're doing today that you're like, well, I didn't imagine this a year ago?
Maybe it's not so much like things that I didn't expect to do, it's just doing them all at once, maybe.
Okay.
They're like touching such a wide variety of things. So like I think copywriting is one of them, just like not so much like marketing copy, but more so like the UX writing that goes into a product and just, you know, making sure that everything makes sense. But then also, you know, like I'm a product designer, I identify as a product designer, but I'm constantly touching the brand as well and illustrating a ton, and it's just like I said, like all these things just happening all at once, more so. The web development, I don't think I was like shocked that I would be like getting into some CSS, but at the same time, I definitely wasn't expecting to also like commit to a branch or like write a command line in the terminal. Like, the CSS stuff, I was like, okay, like I can dabble there, but downloading, I don't know, all the things, GitHub, and I don't even know what we it's just like, yeah,
It's scary.
all the things.
Do it yourself. The last one.
The same. Yeah, touching the brand itself and being able to write. I never thought that I would have my hands in being able to write for the brand, per se. Right? We think of hierarchy, typography, the way you can manipulate those things. Not actually sitting down, spending time to write them yourself, and then say, hey, let's get some feedback on what I deliver, right? So writing has been key, and then also the development portion. Again, I don't want to design an overlay on a desktop that wouldn't support it in mobile. Like that's counterintuitive. So thinking about the experiences from inputs and how it interacts with the server and everything like that, like those things are imperative that I didn't think were in my role, those things work enough for me to build a better product as a product designer. So it's as everyone mentioned, copy and development. That's it.
Cool. Our topic is like getting into product design, so I'm gonna get back to that. And I got like one more question for the people, and then I'll open it up to you guys. But curious, who's a product designer now? Who is in product as it speaks? Yeah. I got like maybe. Is that maybe? All right. Good. And who wants to get into it? Like who's trying to break in? All right, a few people. I love like people don't raise like when they raise their hand, they're like, oh, what is it above their shoulder? I don't know if that's what a hand raise. So, all right, my question is what's your advice for these people then? Right? So, everything. What should they have in a portfolio? Like, should they what is going to get your attention to want to hire this person? And like, how should they what steps should they take to break into this field? We'll go back to you.
I think first and foremost is be specific on what you want to do. And I say that with the caveat of the last question. You will figure out and find that there's things that you will end up doing that aren't part of what you set out to do, but it's good to be specific up front. So for example, let's say you want to be an interaction designer or a visual designer, sort of focus on those areas. If your portfolio speaks of those things and you can emphasize those, that helps. But understand and be flexible on learning something new and different, because it's only going to make you better at that craft. And again, network, find people in the community, find people here that you can talk to about either what you're struggling or what you really want to focus on, and just expand from there. And last thing, do a lot of shit. And I don't mean like crazy stuff. No, not shitty shit, but just do a lot of shit. If you need to copy from someone, your favorite designer, if you need to copy from certain designers, just do so much shit that you understand it will become second nature. And then with the right amount of community and mentorship, you will learn what to fix, what to tweak, what to build upon, and what to be better at. That's all I got. See.
You yourself, what advice?
Yeah. So we were kind of talking about this in Matchup the other day, and the two things that I think that, probably everyone here on this panel has is that curiosity of, how things work and why things work and why we're building things, and then just that desire to learn, because again, we're not just, we got into product design to be designers, but we are doing all these things. So I think that it's just having, those two qualities. But then also, just the things that you're making, I don't want to copy what you said or anything, but it's true. You just have to make a lot of things, and kind of as you're making things and having these side projects, you really do start to nail down what you're interested in and what you want to make. And I think from there, you're not only exploring those curiosities, but you're kind of building your portfolio at the same time. So it's killing two birds with one stone.
Awesome. Ashley?
Yeah, I think I don't know. I was thinking about this because I've interviewed a lot of people for product roles in past jobs here in Chicago, and I remember one position I was interviewing people for, and I talked to so many people, and I did not find anyone that I liked, and they were all from I know they were all
I agree with you.
They were all from this sort of this sort of standard product background, and just talking with them and talking about what they did, it just wasn't what I wanted. And what I ended up doing was going internally and finding a few people who had sort of different strengths, but hadn't done product before, and just said, hey, would you be interested in this? Come on, I'll help you out. We'll figure it out as we go. And it worked out so amazingly well. And so my advice is to find advocates, like find people who will advocate for you. And that may or may not be your manager, but just like doing the networking thing and like finding people who will do that for you. I think there have been like various trends over like the past 5 years of what a product manager should be, or like the requirements that they should have. When I moved to Chicago, that requirement was must have an MBA. Must have an MBA from like a top 5 business school. Now it's must have a CS degree. I don't have either of those things. And I don't have either of those things, and I don't think that a good product manager or someone who wants to get into product needs to have those things. I think it's sort of silly that there are these sort of like requirements lists like that out there. But I think, like everything everyone has said, like having that curiosity, finding those mentors, and knowing what you want to do. Yeah, definitely.
Cool.
Be inspired.
Eric.
+1 to knowing what you want to do and pick something. I think a lot of people may come into a company that they like, and they may try to present themselves in a way that maybe isn't them. But if they want to do that, then pick that and go for it and explain why, because people will see that. Go to networking events, eat well, sleep good. It all contributes, it all matters. And be professional all the time. When I interviewed at Sprout, one of the co-founders, Gil, put up some emails with people we work together 2010. And I actually forgot about it completely. He's like, look, dude, like, this is us interacting several years ago. It matters. Like, you're going to meet the same people later on in your career. So just rock it all the time.
Yeah.
Marina, how do people get their chesty?
Well, I mean, like everything you guys, I'm piggybacking on everything you guys have said, but I think the thing I would say that I wish somebody said to me when I was like just getting out of college or looking for a job, my first job here, and like, we're designers in such an interesting time when there's Dribble, Behance, like everybody's just bragging and showing all their awesome stuff on the internet, and you're like, man, I want to do that. Like, I wish I could make it look like that. Look at these cool trends. Look at this flat icon. Like, you just look at all this stuff and you're like, this is what I'm supposed to do. Like, that's what you think. But just don't compare yourself to others, because you will have so much inner peace with yourself if you compare yourself to yourself and like how the standard you put on yourself. And I really learned that when I took my starter league class, because I was very competitive at first, and I was like, I need to be the best. I need to, know these answers more than anybody else in the class, and that really hindered my learning and my education. And the moment I was like, okay, I'm a little slower than everyone, I'm gonna accept that. And it took me a little longer to do things. It took me a little longer to figure something out. And once I stopped comparing myself to the people in my class, I really started to learn, and I started to help other people because they weren't designers and they were coming to me. And so I kind of had to take things slow with them, because they had to learn about like pixel size, what's that matters, or things that I take for granted every day. So just not comparing yourself to the people who have 1 million Dribble likes and views on Instagram for their awesome, beautiful work. Yeah, it's beautiful, but you have to remember that they probably worked just as hard as you're probably going to have to work to get something like that.
Cool. Thank you. All right, your turn. What questions do you guys have? Yeah.
So I'm sure like you get feedback from different groups of people. Sometimes you get feedback from designers, sometimes you get feedback from developers, and probably at different stages of your design, right? So like, how are those types of feedback different? And do you like consciously or subconsciously go to specific groups of people at different stages? Like, what do you do? And like, I don't know, do you like post in a Slack channel, put a screenshot, get feedback, or like what works? And how are they different?
I'll jump in on this first. So it varies, right? So for me, I know once I place copy or a layout somewhere, I know the marketing team is going to worry about that first. So I'll play with the copy first and then go to them before I go to development. When I go to development, I've thought out the user experience. I thought out the flow. I thought out the entire engagement and the interaction. I say that because each discipline is worried about different things for them. Development isn't worried about what marketing says, what the brand speaks. They can code it that way. H1, H2, they can code it that way. But they're not really concerned about that more so than marketing would be because it's tied to the brand. So for me, I'll touch different points of the organization based on where I'm at the stage. And then when I have certain things flushed out for each department, within another sketch, which then started with the CAD model, which then started with, right, so there's an iterative process with that. The software started the same exact way. We want the users to do X, Y, Z. The UI, we're going to sketch it out this way. Then that's an iteration, and that's an iteration. Well, based on what we want our users to do, we can design our phone congruent to that. So hardware and software needs to be in tandem. There's usually a product manager for both, the digital side and the hardware side. The reason being is because I'm not going to make this a walkie-talkie, right, if it doesn't have walkie-talkie capabilities. That marriage needs to be seamless. So I'll make this with the power button on this side, knowing that I can press it here, but my volume control is on the other side, right? Like, so the marriage between how the software and how the product, the digital product works, needs to be seamless to how the function and ergonomics of this works.
Did you find, sorry to skip on that?
No, go ahead.
Did you
I hope
find-
I answered that for you.
Did you find one discipline or the other more or less difficult? Like, kind of tag on that, like, which one did you find to be, maybe you're just like a physical engineering genius that was like super easy for you, and then you just like do this digital stuff. But I'm curious, like, which one did you, like, after having done both, which one do you feel is like makes your mind work more?
That's interesting. I'll say this. They both activate different types of learning and expertise. For example, we'll go back to the phone. So with product design, you have to test physical product design. You have to test out a ton of different things. I can make this in aluminum versus a different plastic. I can make it in polyurethane versus a different type of wood. Why, though? And that matters because of the usage of the product, how we handle this thing. I wouldn't want to make it glass because, right, like I drop it in the water, or I break it, or whatever, right? So experiment with different materials, per se. I don't know if a lot of you seen the bin test on the iPhones and how they break and stuff like that. A lot of thought went into what material was used for. We take that to now the opposite side is at the digital side, right? So what type of typography we're going to use to convey our brand? What type of interface we're going to use the power button? Should that come from the bottom or should it come from the top? Should the volume control show up at the lower level, right? Like, so now we think about the experience in usage versus how ergonomically we're going to use this. So it's just two different sides and two different ways of thinking. But look at it like this. Product is more material and function. The digital side is more interaction and usage.
Eric, did you have thoughts?
I didn't. I was just thinking about the Apple Watch and tattoos while he was talking. It's so hard to just test all scenarios, you know, with this good stuff. I don't know. I've never worked in it, but I can imagine it's.
Realistically, seriously though, which one do you think, did you find either to be more difficult than the other, or did you find one to be like more difficult?
I don't find them either one to be difficult than the other. It takes a different expertise. I think digital was more like, I can slap Comic Sans on something and it looks horrible, but to me, I'm like, yeah, that works. It's that good. It's a UI, right? But I'm like, what the hell? I'm just starting out, right? Whereas product is the same thing, like to know the thickness and to understand bin radiuses and to understand how they manufacture these things. Because like when you're designing for them, how they actually sit these things in the tooling to mold them is a different expertise, right? Because it takes draft angles. Draft angles meaning when they sit this in the mold to form it, like they pour plastic or however they form it. There's a draft angle, meaning when the tool comes in to get this thing out, you have to compensate for the draft angle that the tool needs to be in order to get it out and not damage the actual product. So it's just a different level. It's entirely different. But the concept is still the same. So don't let me scare you guys who really want to be in product design. It's just a different expertise. And you learn that as you go along. So same thing with digital, right? Pixel size or point size with copy and type. So it's just different.
We have time for one more question. Who wants it? In the back? Yeah.
Yeah, for the product manager. Sorry, I'm probably the only other PM in the room.
Oh, yay!
How do you deal with engineers over engineering? And what I mean by that is you have a customer with a very limited scope of work. I need this very specific thing done. Engineers go do it, and the engineers are like, oh cool, we can go do this and all these cool other things. And as a product manager, you gotta be like, I don't want to be a buzzkill, but we only really need this.
I think the same could be said for design too, right?
Yeah. I think as a product manager, you have to be comfortable with being a buzzkill. Sometimes. I feel like that. I feel like that happens less with engineering, and I actually do feel like that happens more with design. Sometimes, but I think it's just making sure that you have a really good relationship with your engineers and a really good relationship with your designers and your whole team, so that you can communicate clearly like what you need. And if you always go back to, this is less true of design, but I think sometimes it can be true of engineers, where sometimes what they're doing is much farther removed from the user. And so if you are able to frame like whatever small piece that they're doing that is contributing to the larger whole and the type of problem that it's solving for the user, and really crystallize that, then I think the argument then becomes, we need, this is the problem that we're trying to solve, like how do we get there without adding anything extraneous because we just don't have time, or whatever the problem is, or it's not needed right now. So
I think too, though, from the design perspective, like cutting scope is heartbreaking and it sucks, but it's also like, how can we iterate in a way, like how can we blue sky or greenfield this feature and still accomplish the immediate need? So like, how can we pull that scope back? And then it's just like a matter of like that communication and that iteration process, I think.
Cool. Well, round of applause for these people for helping out. Again, thanks to Cards Against Humanity for letting us borrow their space and providing all the food and booze as well. That's fantastic. Kudos to them. And then to Victoria, again, for getting us all in here.